Hello there, lovely ladies and gentlemen. In today's live, I'm going to talk about 4 things that happen when you discover that your mom or your dad is a pathological narcissist. But first, heads up, if you're interested in healing and you like the way I approach healing from childhood narcissistic abuse, then know that on July 3rd, we will be launching the Inner Mastery Lab, and you can find out more about that by clicking on the link in the description of this video, or if you're on Instagram, by clicking on the link in my biography. So hello to everybody that's connecting right now. I'm going to get right on started. Now, I have made other videos similar to this one in the past, but I found that there has been a huge number of new followers, like thousands over the past few weeks. So the questions that I've been getting are starting to get a little repetitive, in that I see that there's this new wave of people who are just discovering narcissism and dealing with it. So I wanted to make this video for you so that you can understand what to expect and what you're going through right now, because I get how crazy making all of this is. There's obviously a lot of things that can happen from the moment you find out about narcissism in your parents, but I'm going to mention 4 things here. So the very first thing that I want to mention is that you are going to be in shock. And shock is actually one of the phases of grieving, okay? And I'll go into those a little bit later. But it is shocking because your entire reality is changing, right? You have access to new information that makes your old beliefs no longer hold true anymore, and you can't pretend to not see it. And it really feels like reality itself is reorganizing itself. You might have a sensation that your personality is disintegrating, that you're in a million pieces, or that reality itself is in a million pieces. Like you've lost your sense of direction of what's north, south, east, west. Like you've lost a notion of what is real and what isn't real. Along with this shock, you will probably swing back and forth between 2 very strong poles in your mind. One of them is going to keep telling you that you're a bad child. You really shouldn't be looking into these things. It's not that bad. It's not what you're going through, and that you're betraying your family and you're doing something wrong, right? And the other side of you, hey Deborah, hey Manu, hey Renata, hey Jenny. The other side of you is like begging for freedom, and it's very much this instinctual force that has no name, but that is yearning for something, and you might call it freedom, individuation, being connected with your true self. So what we notice in the shock phase is that for a period of about, I've noticed, like anywhere between 4 to 7 months, you will swing back and forth between I'm a horrible child, I'm guilty, I shouldn't be looking into all of this, and this is where it's at. Something inside me is resonating with this, and my reality, the way that I used to see it, no longer stands true. You might actually experience psychosis during this period, and it's quite weird. And what this means is that during those first few months, you might be so anxious that you might actually like hear your mom calling out your voice. I'm calling out your name. This is actually something that happened to me, and I thought it was kind of weird, but with clients, I was able to observe that there's a high incidence of hearing things in the first few months, or even feeling as if you are being psychically invaded. Some clients ask me like, Tari, what's happening? It's almost like I feel her presence. And I don't want to make this spiritual or anything like that, particularly because I wouldn't be able to talk about any of that stuff. I don't really have information on it. But I want to describe how it feels. And it's this foreboding sensation, this foreboding presence, as if your mom or your dad is inside you and reacting to this new freedom and this new information that you are experiencing. So, all right, all of these things are part of the shock phase. And I did mention that the shock phase or stage is actually one of the many stages involved in grieving. Now, why would you need to go into grieving when discovering that your mom or dad is a narcissist? Well, because grieving is a natural response that is set off in the psyche whenever you lose something, or even when you lose the idea of something. Like, for example, if you're flirting with someone and you start feeding these fantasies of getting married and having children, and then it doesn't go like beyond just flirting, even that might set off a grieving phase where you let the fantasy that you created for your future die. So the interesting thing about grieving is that you cry over that which you've lost, but you also cry over that which it seems you've lost. And in the case with narcissistic parents, it's really weird because we realize that the love wasn't really there to begin with. So there's a grieving in that. It's one thing to have something and lose it. It's a different type of grieving when you realize you've been living in a fantasy world your entire life, and what you thought was love actually isn't what you thought it was at all. That's a weird type of reality. It's self-dying. The image of your mom, that goddess that you used to see, if that was your case, or your dad, letting that die. So I'm going to talk about a few of the stages, right, that are involved in grieving. And like I said, we go into grieving when we discover our mom or dad is a pathological narcissist, because our reality changes and we must mourn over what has died and adapt to a new type of reality with new rules. One of the stages in this grieving process is obviously the denial phase. So it's that moment where, you know what, I'm sure she doesn't have like narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe he has some narcissistic traits. I'm sure that, with time, if I just try this tactic or approach him that way, then, maybe things can get better. So in the denial phase, it's just too much for you. Because for you to admit that what you thought was love really wasn't, and that you really cannot depend on anything healthy at all from your mom or your dad, that's not really a reality you want to digest, because it involves all sorts of things. It might involve you saying goodbye to family members that are in that environment and who aren't breaking free themselves, because you know that if you have contact with them, you're going to have contact with that other person. So you might let lots of people go, right? It might involve, like I said, the shock and all the guilt and all of that that's going on, becoming financially and emotionally and socially independent, right? Generating a new support system for yourself when you might feel like, you're not really that interesting a person, and who's going to want to be your friend. So all of these little things make us accepting that we need to reduce or cut contact with our primary support system really, really scary. And we deny it. We deny that it's happening. It's not really what's happening in my case. I'm sure it's something else in my case. Another phase is the bargaining phase. This is when you can already see, that those rays of light are poking through your flawed version of reality, right? You can see things more clearly now when it comes to abusive behaviors that your mom or dad demonstrates. But you don't want to kind of rock the boat too much, and you want to make it work without really changing the status quo. And you do this by bargaining with the situation. This just means that you try to find ways of making the relationship work without actually having to face the fact that it can't work. So this might be like you start giving your parents presents, you start giving them gifts, you start being extra nice to them, you try to win them over, you try to be extra obedient, extra passive, give them extra money, extra attention, extra time. Or you even try different things out, like maybe if I don't talk to them on the phone but send them messages, that'll work. Or maybe if I try this level of contact, that'll be sustainable. Or maybe if I do that, it'll be sustainable. So you're trying to find all these different ways of essentially making something that you don't want to admit to yourself that doesn't work, right? There's also a phase of sadness, a stage of depression. Like I said, it's one thing to cry over something that you had and lost. It's another thing altogether to realize that you never really had it in the first place. That is, excuse the language, if there's little ones, you cover their ears, but it's quite a mind fuck you know? And it's like, what the heck do I do with my sense of what love is? It's quite a mind fuck. So during this depression phase, you're never gonna have it either. You never had it and you're never gonna have it. Whatever it is that you dreamt of in terms of spending Christmases with your family and, you know, having children and having your children have contact with the good aspects of your parents. Maybe your parents, like in the case of my mom, for example, maybe they have great characteristics. My mom is hilarious. She's hilarious and she's super artistic and energetic and all sorts of things, but she's unstable as heck. You know what I mean? So you have to mourn the beautiful things that you can't have because the cost, you can never pay for it. The debt that you have to pay for being able to be around them when they're in their good phases, you can never pay for it. So there's the sadness in the morning, right? And it might set off an anger phase. Anger towards what? Anger towards yourself. How could I be so stupid? How did I accept this? Why couldn't I see? Oftentimes victims of abuse will blame themselves. Isn't that what rape victims do? I put myself in the situation, I should have known, I should have this, I should have that, right? Anger towards life. Why have I been dealt a bad hand? Just anger, like why do I have to deal with all this lost time? I'm 40, 50, however old I am now. And now I discovered this? Now I'm going to find out who I am? You know? Anger towards your parents, anger towards family members who didn't do anything, who saw all sorts of family secrets happen and all sorts of really unstable, crazy things happen that obviously any adult should have been able to stop, and they didn't. They didn't stop it. Everyone was participating in the dynamics oftentimes. So there's that anger. And none of these stages are very clear cut. They're quite cyclical. You go back and forth between them. You know, you might experience different stages throughout years and then feel like you're fine for quite a while. And then a little bit of anger pops up again. And it's like an onion. You have a new level, a new layer to deal with. And it's important to understand this because this is a messy process. And it requires so much self-compassion, so much empathy towards ourselves, because it's not going to be fast, it's not going to be clean, it's going to be messy, it's cyclical and it's repetitive, and it seems like you're always coming back to the same thing. And you are, but you're stronger each time, or you're more aware each time. And as all of this happens, you enter the stage of acceptance. Hey, Danielle. And in the acceptance phase, you are indifferent towards your parents. You don't care about their opinion, and you have given yourself permission to live life according to your rules, and you don't really care anymore. And it's not just not caring, because it's one thing to cut ties with the toxic people, but it's another thing altogether to rebuild your life. It's not enough to cut ties with the toxic people. I've met loads of people who've been no contact for like 10 years and they have nightmares every night with their mom. There's got to be inner work that's done, and there's got to be outer work that's done. You have to objectively look at your situations and change them, the ones that don't reflect your true self, right? And this is the acceptance phase. Okay, so all of what I said right then was actually just the first thing I wanted to mention amongst the four things that happen, amongst other things, when you discover that your mom or your dad is a narcissist. So what I mentioned was the shock. And what I also mentioned is that the shock is part of a greater grieving process that involves, you know, bargaining, denial, depression, anger, and acceptance. Also, it might be that you have actually already gone through some of these phases before discovering narcissism. Some people, they guide themselves instinctively and according to their intuition, and they were able to break free or gain distance or go no contact because it's just what they needed to do. And so they have gone through different mourning phases, grieving phases, right? They've gone through denial and bargaining and depression. And now they've discovered the word narcissist. So they might be, you know, at any one of those phases. It might be that you kind of went through some of them before discovering the word narcissist. Okie dokie. Hey, Sophia. So I'm going to talk about the second thing that happens, and it's the guilt. Now, guilt has been used for the longest time within family structures to stimulate obedience. So, how do you stimulate obedience in people? You make them feel guilty and ashamed. And so this is already a cultural trait, particularly if you're coming from very family-based cultures like Asian cultures or Latin cultures. And when you're dealing with abusive personality structures, they definitely take advantage of the fact that conscientious people or neurotic people, who experience their own anxiety in a more direct way, they worry about stuff like guilt and shame and all of that, and it affects them, so they take advantage of this. This is just another way of saying that, of course, your narcissistic parents are going to guilt trip the living crap out of you. They are going to guilt trip you to smithereens. And this is why, as weird as it may sound, when you start feeling that guilt, it's because you're going against your family structure, and this is good. I know it's crazy making, I know it's intense, but it means that you're taking the steps in the direction of your individuation. You're becoming an adult. And that's why you're feeling guilt. The guilt gets activated when we break free from our clan, from our family structure. It's a type of betrayal. We feel that way, like it's a type of betrayal. And it also means that you're less protected, right? Because you're leaving your structure behind and you're going off to the wild, wild world by yourself. So the thing about guilt that I want to say is you're going to feel it. It's going to be overpowering, but you can't make it overpowering. You got to keep taking steps. If they're steps that are generating that sort of guilt that gets activated when you start taking care of yourself, when you start becoming an adult, when you start individuating, that's when that guilt gets activated, that toxic guilt, right? Which is actually liberating because it indicates that you're doing something for yourself. So number one, shock, which is part of a grieving phase that involves many other stages. Number two, guilt, right? It involves betraying your family system and becoming your own person, and this is okay and good. Number three, things start making sense. The family secrets, the weird behavior, the contrast between what you saw in your home and what it seems other people went through in their homes. The specific difficulties you have emotionally, existentially, all of these things start making sense. And you might have gone through therapy and you might have tried a number of different things, but really just discovering that word narcissism, personality disorder, if you're dealing with a personality disordered person, or even someone with just narcissistic traits, it just makes everything become clear. Which is weird because, like I said, in the first part, right, of this video, which is the shock phase, everything stops making sense. And simultaneously, everything makes sense. Your illusion stops looking true. And then reality starts making sense. Manu here said that she doesn't have any guilt anymore. Absolutely. If you keep taking steps towards yourself, the guilt goes away. And that's what you need to know, because it can seem quite overwhelming in the beginning, and it's just a manipulation tactic. If you can take steps towards what's right for you, despite the guilt or fear, you are home free. That is what it is. And the fourth thing that I want to mention here is a process that I did not think about an English term for this process, so I'm going to have to make one up. Okay, you go through a testing phase. I'm going to make I'm going to coin that expression. It's a testing phase. Why? Why do we have to go through a testing phase when we discover that our parents are narcissists? Again, we don't want to admit it. We want to see how much of our reality is going to change, how much is going to remain the same. But really here in this testing phase, I'm actually talking about deeper, longer periods of your life, oftentimes involving years, and oftentimes happening after you've gone no contact, and even after you've gone a gray rock or low contact or whatever. Even after you thought, you know what, I've dealt with this, I've come to my resolution, this is okay, it's over and done with. Because what happens is that sometimes you're off working on yourself, licking your wounds, doing your healing, you're feeling good about yourself. But then something happens, like a worldwide pandemic, and your mom is diabetic and gets sick. You know, something like that. Or your dad is freaking out because God knows what. And then what happens? They pop into your life again like freaking mushrooms. And there's some sort of big ailment or a crisis, right? They come into your life and there's a crisis already. And then part of you, because you're their child, is still like, you know what? It's been a while. It's been years sometimes. I've strengthened myself. I don't know this person anymore. It's been a while. Let me test this out. So you let yourself go back. You let yourself go back to the relationship. And what happens is everything all over again. And this testing phase, it happened to me. It happens to so many of my clients. And I think that we have the wrong reaction to it when it happens. I think we're like, oh, I can't believe I'm such an idiot. I thought I'd been working on myself long enough. I thought I was strong. And here I am just, in the same damn relationship with the same dynamics. This does not change. And we feel like fools. We really do. It's not about feeling like a fool. I believe that life is designed to help you expand. So I believe all experiences are part of your personalized learning curriculum. You have your own personalized learning curriculum. And this experience of coming from a space of healing, of having been working on yourself and going back to your old ways, what it does is it creates contrast. And when you have contrast, you gain clarity. I feel that in this testing phase, we oftentimes might, through the course of a number of years, heal and feel that we are done with all of that, and then we let ourselves go back because we feel we don't know that person, time has passed, something might have changed because we have. Well, nothing changes. Nothing changes, of course, right? And then we develop this little voice inside our mind that tells us nothing changes. It doesn't change. It doesn't change. And then when the person pops up, that voice pops up automatically. You don't have to go through the testing phase anymore. You know that nothing changes. And if you choose to have contact with the person, you know that it's going to be in that way where nothing changes. Hey, Anna. Okie dokie. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that this has been useful for those of you who have just discovered or who have been going through this process for a little bit and wanted a little bit more clarity. Again, on July 3rd, if you feel you need further support, I really think that you would benefit from the Inner Mastery Lab. There's the self-study program, but on July 3rd, we are launching the group program, and it's 10 weeks of intense support. It is transformational, and I've been getting great results, not only in Portuguese, but also in English. It is a powerful program, okay? For what? What's it a powerful program for? For creating psychological distance, for connecting you with your inner courage and wisdom so you can take steps, okay, and navigate all of these situations with regards to your mental health and your toxic family members. So check that out. Click on the link in my description if you're on YouTube, or in my biography if you're on Instagram. Thank you so much, guys. I see that you're making some comments. I will answer those comments. If you're on YouTube and you come to my Instagram account, Tariana Rocha, altogether, that's my Instagram account, I do answer the questions after the lives. But right now I'm going to wrap this up for YouTube. You guys stay connected, and I'll read your comments. Thank you so much for you guys who are on YouTube. Share this video. It might be super useful for someone. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell button so that you can get notified when we launch videos in English e em português. A gente também faz vídeos em português. And yeah, I'll see you around. Thank you so much.